felt like were important to you no longer important. You know, you start to lose some of your spark. You don't feel connected.
Mm.
It's like no matter how much I pray or meditate, inventory, whatever, meetings, new meetings, talk, you know, all that nightly inventory, no matter what I do, nothing works anymore. You know,
Yeah.
that type of deal.
Oh yeah.
And you just go through this, and you just, you know, the whole premise of what we were talking about is you just got to push through it. You know, you just
Yeah.
got to lean on your people. For me, that was the thing is, you know, there's this guy, Mike D, gives a great talk about it. And he's like, when that hits, because it's going to hit, it hits everybody at some point, especially people like in recovery who are on like the spiritual path. When that hits, do you have the heart to push through, and are you going to talk about it? You know what I mean? Because that to me was like just talking to this guy. He didn't have to give me any solution. It was just talking to him.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know where the heck, I don't know why I got off on that tangent. Or what we
I
were
don't
talking
know,
about,
but it's. I mean, it's perfect because
Yeah.
that's. I mean, that's just my whole. I'm working on a documentary right now, and it's the first time I felt a creative energy, and I couldn't tell you how long.
Yeah.
I haven't had any spark.
Yeah.
But I keep, but I just keep doing the thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I think it also separates like an amateur from a professional, right? A professional is able to go, I'm not feeling this, but I know what to do, so I'm going to do that thing.
Yeah.
And I still can create good works, but I just don't have as much fun
Right.
doing it. And so it was really cool just today. Today was the first day I was hype. I'm like, dang, this is kind of dope.
Yeah.
And I hadn't felt that in a long time. I didn't think I was ever going to feel it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hit those points. You're like, God, it's like, what am I doing? you know?
I think too, like, I think I've probably hit it a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it is age. For me, I feel like it's like spiritual development, and we have to like be able to let go of, like, I think one of the big things is like the way we might interact with our higher power. So a lot of people in the beginning of that relationship with a higher power, there are all these like faith building experiences you get, where it's like, oh, this thing worked out, or
Right.
that job I was looking for, God, that, and all these things that seem to be happening for you, you
Yeah.
know. And then after a while, if you continue on a spiritual path, inevitably things stop kind of working for you. And you kind of think, oh, what's going on? Like, but it's because the relationship is supposed to evolve and change. And I think there is like, you know, at some point we should begin, and I think the book says this too, like what used to be an occasional thought
Yeah.
becomes,
Yeah. What used to be a hunch now becomes,
yeah,
like consistent inspiration. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so then the thing that I'm trying to connect to is no longer there. It's here.
Yeah.
And then I might could start trusting some of my instinct again, which is
Right.
really scary.
Yeah.
So I think we're supposed to kind of hit these, and the way that I think my spiritual life is now is, you know, the only prayers I can say are just prayers of gratitude.
Yeah.
That's everything else I say. I think it's going to be bullshit, to be honest with you. I could say I want
true.
this, give me that,
Right.
or help homeboy with his thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Come on in. You get some nachos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's it going? Good. Good. Thank you.
Check out this camera because it's not. There's no picture. And there's it's locked.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's on. Is it so loud?
Well.
It's on.
Yeah. David Cleope was that up.
Good, huh? How
I feel like I know David Cleope. David sounds so familiar.
No four? 2, and 4. But who knows how long it'll stay like that, you know?
And that's what this guy was talking. He was like, man, it could be weeks, months, sometimes for last years for people. But I think one of the things that I took from it was listening to some of Carl Jung's stuff about it. Is what happens is you start to lose a lot of these labels and identifications that you've developed for yourself. Like
and that is a grief. That's a dying.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting process.
Dying to these parts of you that were so real.
Right.
And then they're like not real anymore.
Right.
You're like, who the fuck am I?
Exactly. Well, that's exactly what. Who the hell am I? And
Yeah.
what am I doing? Yeah. You're like, wake up. You're like, oh my god.
This is not my beautiful house. And the days go by, water flowing underground. What's up, May? Over there.
Sorry, yeah, we're all good.
We're all
Cool.
good.
Ready to record, yes.
Well, we've been recording. I don't know if he's been recording, but we've been recording.
I know, but did you do the introduction?
Not yet.
Okay, that's fine.
But I feel like we're on a thought process. I'd like to continue down this. I
Yeah.
just accidental
Those are
episode
the
on the
best,
Dark
yeah.
Night.
Right.
I do think too. It's because you're continuing on the path. That's the key, like, we kind of grow, and in the beginning, there's certain. You've heard of Ken Wilber. Have you heard of Ken Wilber and the theory of everything?
I don't know. I don't know if I've heard that.
It's
one.
called.
I don't think so.
I have to always Google it because I always forget. Ken Wilber. Have you heard of Ken Wilber?
No, I haven't. Who is he?
He did the theory of everything, which is called integral theory. So it's no, Ken Wilber created integral theory. So basically, he went into his apartment and tried to figure out how everything worked. And he's like a philosopher. And essentially, it's like this. It's like when I'm home alone by myself, there are certain rules that apply in that environment. I can wear what I want to wear. I can watch what I want to watch. I can cook whatever food I
yeah.
want to cook, right?
Yeah.
But now, add someone into that. Now the rules of that environment change a little bit.
Yeah.
Now I might want to consider what I put on the TV. I might consider when I cook, do you want something to eat? What
Yeah.
would you like?
Maybe put a shirt on.
Maybe put a shirt on. And then it expands even further to my household and my neighborhood, to my community,
Yeah.
to society as a large.
Yeah.
And so rules begin to change the further we get out from the circle. And so when you apply integral theory to spiritual development, you have the beginning, which is there's a certain amount of rules in the beginning of a spiritual process. And so a lot of it is like a fundamental practice of that religion.
Yeah.
Maybe not religion, but framework. People do this with the steps also, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Real rigid rules, strict guidelines, strict guardrails. This is good. That's bad. We need that in the beginning of that. And then ideally what we do is we begin to mature and grow outside of that
Yeah.
to where what used to be a real hard line is now not quite as clear. It becomes gray, right?
Yeah.
And this is what like the mystics begin. And so the mystics, if you think of like a religious practice, the mystics are kind of way out here. And unfortunately what happens in spiritual development is people stay here.
Mm-hmm.
They stay stuck to the rules and the guardrails, which makes sense because tell me I'm a good boy, right?
Right.
But we're meant to grow beyond that. And it makes the rules even more important, right? Because it gives us kind of that guidepost to know. And I think as you're continuing to grow, you're going like, oh, there's new rules now,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's interesting because that has been part of the experience, right? It's almost like as you're saying, like growing beyond this, like this part here is almost just this, like I'm getting frustrated with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like this is starting to really take me off. Like even even the 12-step stuff that, I mean, I just love, right? It's like it goes from being this, and it's good in the beginning that it's like super robotic and very like, I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah.
But eventually it just gets to the point where, like, God dang it, I'm even sick of this right now too.
Yeah.
And that was part of that like dissolving process of like the different labels and identities that I have had, to where all of them are stripped away, professionally, personally, recovery, like all of it. And I'm just kind of like, screw all this right now.
Yeah.
It's like reopening myself up to what the universe has.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've experienced that in like every phase of my life right now.
Yeah.
It's
That's
wild.
beautiful. It's painfully beautiful.
It's confusing.
Yeah.
It's like it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And but that's where, like, I always talk about how the connection piece is so important in this life, is because God always talks to me through other people.
Yeah.
And it almost like when I hear somebody else's experience this, whatever it is, it almost like gives permission for my experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it makes it okay in a way, So
Dude.
even though it is painful or difficult or challenging or whatever words we want to use, like it's good.
Yeah.
Like good is happening.
Yeah.
Being forged, being molded, being tested, being tried. Like it sucks,
Yeah.
but it's good.
Yeah, and the only reason why it sucks is because we're so attached to what was,
Yeah.
and we think that that's who we are, and so we walk around and go, "I'm this. Hey, I'm Christian. I'm this person."
Mm-hmm.
And if you pretend I'm that person, I'll pretend you're the person you think you are, and we're just going to pretend to each other.
Right.
But we're not even really existing. It's these personas that we're projecting that are
Yeah.
existing with each other, and then we're over here, and we get so attached to that persona that when that persona stops working, we go, well, now what? And we don't want to let it go.
Yep.
And that's such a struggle. It's really hard.
It's very hard. You identify with it.
But God bless you for letting it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to.
That's the gift of alcoholism.
Isn't it?
Because we have proven, we have empirical evidence that if I continue on a path, it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't have that experience.
Yeah.
So they'll just cling to that persona.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why we have ideological wars in this country and this society.
Yeah.
Because everyone's clung so deeply to their ideologies. They're not even a person anymore. They're just an expression of an ideology.
And most people don't make that decision to let go, like you said, because they don't have to. That's why you say,
Yeah.
where you say, like, grateful for being an alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever. It's because, like, we hit this point where, like, I had to. I had no other choice. It was the only thing left for me to do, you know. How else would I have gotten there? I wouldn't have.
Right.
I wouldn't have attempted to do that.
And the only reason why you're doing it now is because it hurts bad enough.
Yes,
That
exactly.
you're going to do something about it.
Exactly. Yes. All right. I'm going to make that decision again.
Yeah.
Why?
There's
Because-
no piety or like brilliance in it. It's just
No.
your head's bleeding and you're like, why is my head bleeding? I keep banging my head against this wall. Maybe I should stop banging my head against the wall.
That's what I always say about my relationship with God. It's like I don't have it because I wanted it.
Yeah.
I really
You got it because you needed it.
I needed it.
Yeah.
I had to have it.
That's the best way to word step 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're 1 through 3 all together.
Yeah.
Because that process, man, that happens over and over again.
Over and over again.
It's the new layer that gets pulled back.
Yeah. All right. So we're doing a little warm up. This is my good friend, Brian. We're going to do a little intro. And you guys ready?
Yeah.
Got the camera going. We got the lights. We got the audience kicking it.
All right, cool.
I don't even like calling y'all audience. It's not right.
A studio audience.
Yeah, that's like,
Steve
there's
Harvey.
like, I swear there's like 17 people in here right now, and there's like 30 more out there. It's really wild. I don't know how they got in here. All right, so the title of this episode is called Get to Steppin'.
Get to step.
There are many different frameworks for spiritual development. And let's face it, recovery is spiritual development, especially when what we mean by spiritual is that thing that you can't quite fully describe or understand about yourself. A depth, an inner knowing. It incorporates all the parts of the self. That is what we mean when we say spiritual. No other framework teaches how to live spiritual Many teach us what to believe to live spiritual, but we don't usually do a good job with the how. The steps are a framework of action. It's not a don't program, it's a do program. And in this episode, we'll talk through each step, what we did and what each step did to us and for us and through us. So this is the Most High Show. With me today is my good friend Brian S. in the seat of service. And if you haven't worked the steps or it's been a while, then this episode is for you. Check it out. It's a good intro.
That's great. Fantastic. Well done.
All right, so first step. We admitted we were powerless over it and that our lives had become unmanageable.
Mm-hmm.
What's your experience with, what's your first experience with this step? And how have you experienced this step continually over the last few years?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I thought that my first experience with this step was 11 years ago when I was 26. And I was coming off of a whole lot of opiates with a whole lot of alcohol and THC. And that didn't work. So I drank myself around the clock for 9 months into a hospital, withdrawal seizures, DTs, the whole thing. Finally had that, again, what I thought was that first step experience of surrender. First time I ever said I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. Finally had that moment of like, man, dude, I can't do this. I need some help. And, I came out of there, started diving into some 12-step fellowship stuff, and never really did any of the work. Wasn't able to really communicate what was going on with me, which I think is, we were talking before, here about how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
And, eventually did the one thing that I swore I was never going to do again. And I picked up against every fiber of my being. I'm not going to do this. You can't do this. If you drink again, you're going to go back in the hospital. You're going to die. Like, you really want to do that? It was that whole thing, man, where it talks about in the big book of alcoholics and addicts, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I said, like, I thought that I experienced that when I was 26, I realized I needed help. I think what that relapse taught me, what that experience after that taught me, was what I experienced was that powerlessness. And what that really meant, that I am powerless over alcohol and drugs. That if there's nothing between me and it, I will go to it. That is the one thing that I will do. Okay, so like this whole idea of like, just don't drink no matter what, just don't get high no matter what. It's like, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I drink and get high no matter what, right? So, I don't at certain times have the power,
Yeah.
So that's got to come from somewhere else, and that had to be experienced, and so when I did pick up that drink, I don't have slips. That last drink was 4 years, man.
Yeah.
I can't stop once I start, and I can't stay stopped if you pull it away from me, so it's about control, not quantity. And I experienced that too, having that experience of, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I can't do this, and then doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And then, like, once I did it, I need to stop this, 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 and then I can't.
Yeah.
Until I'm, deciding I'm going to go down to Daytona on one last hurrah, I'm going to have a good time, I'm going to party it up, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to end my own life. That was where I was at with it.
Yeah.
Because, dude, I tried to stop.
Yeah.
You know what? And I was
You were
driving.
leaving Las Vegas, that shit.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done. Just going to throw it all out there one more time. And then.
But that's how much it sucks. That's how much of a hell it is being in that place of, I'm gonna kick tomorrow. I'm not gonna do this again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only gonna have one drink. I swear I'm just gonna do one drink, or I'm only gonna drink beer, or I'm only gonna do this, or I'm not gonna like go to the bar, but I'll get something at the house. Like all these things of like trying to manage this thing, and then every time breaking the promise to yourself over and over and over again. It's hell on earth.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is, because you can't do the one thing that you need for peace, which is to be authentic with yourself.
Yeah.
You literally, I didn't have the power to do that. I swear to God, I'm going to not do this. And then boom, I'm doing it again, Like, going to jail on a public intox charge, doing all the foxhole prayers in jail. I swear, man, get me out of this, and I'm not drinking. And the first thing I do when I get out, give me a beer and a cigarette. You know what I mean? Like, but I went down to Daytona, and I came back, and I don't know if it was like a stroke or a seizure or what, but everything, I got everything tensed up, my eyes closed up, my fingers, like I couldn't move my hands. I was driving my truck on the way back, and this happened, and Foxhole prayed it again. Please get me out, dude. I'm done. I swear, I promise. Like, please. And like, God gets me out of it, and I'm back on the road again, and I'm drinking. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna taper, because there's just this essence of like, I've got this under control. There's some way that I think that I can control this situation, until I ended up in a closet at 2:00 in the morning, drunk, tears rolling down my eyes.
Whose closet?
It was in my parents' house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, whose closet? And I was, every time I share my story, I'm like, I don't know what anybody else does when they drink at 2:00 in the morning. For whatever reason, I end up in a closet, right? I guess it was safe or something like that. I don't know, man. But God, I don't know. I'm not going to think about what I was thinking about, because it's insane. But I was sitting in there, gun in my hand, bullet in another, trying to put the bullet in the gun, and like, because you get to that point where I had that experience, right? Complete failure at living, complete failure at dying, because now I can't even do this. And that's like, I can't do anything. And now I finally experienced powerlessness. And to me, 1, 2, 3, and I know we'll get into the other ones too, but the 1, 2, 3 experience happens almost simultaneously for me, like with alcohol and drugs. For me in that moment, it was, God, I don't know if you're real, and I don't know if you even give a shit, man. But if you are there and whatever, right? Like, please help, because clearly I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And just that thought in the back of my head that there were other people before me that did this. And again, we could talk about this more in the step 2 type of thing. But that was my experience with it, man. Just I couldn't stay stopped when it was ripped away from me. And once I start, I can't. And again, it's not that I go out on like 7-day blackouts, or I was drinking 7 handles every night. It wasn't like that. But I couldn't stop.
Right.
Once I started.
Yeah. You were breaking that promise to yourself. You were unable to stay stopped. And regardless of what the level of that is, it's still the powerlessness. Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to be behind a Dairy Queen doing weird stuff for it to be the bottom.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was, similar for me was, I had a moment in a hotel in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, where my wife thought I was at work and my work thought I was at home, and I'm blowing a bunch of dope like a budget Charlie Sheen, and looking out the window. And I was like, oh, if I want to continue using like this, I'm going to have to live a different way, because I won't be able to work where I'm working.
Right.
So I'm going to have to do some other things to get money.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something in me that was like, yeah, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And that was like, and I don't know if that's powerlessness or self-preservation, but I had an out. I knew there was an out, and I just needed to take it.
Yeah.
So maybe I really didn't get the powerlessness. To be honest with you, man, I think I keep taking power back all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think, yeah. Yeah, and I think like the obsession was lifted pretty quickly for me. I went into treatment, and I think once those external factors were removed, and I breathed again, and I felt that sunlight of the Spirit, I was kind of like, okay, cool. Like, I'm good. So that's what it was. It was like, okay, good. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good on that. Yeah. I don't need to, I don't want to go there no more.
Like a relief. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that really was a sense of powerlessness, or relief of like, okay, I don't have to live like that. But there was something in that hotel room that the willingness to go, okay, whatever it takes. I need to come clean. Whatever are the consequences of that, I'm going to let it go. I have to just face it,
Yeah.
you know, and drove myself to rehab with my wife and my son in the back seat and driving the whole way going, what the hell am I doing? You know,
Yep.
and walking in and just that, I think that was like this sense of like, oh, I'm not in control anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not in control now. Once I get into this treatment place, I'm not in control. And it was really scary. It was very scary. And I remember wanting to come home very quickly because, not because I wanted to get to drink or anything or use, but I wanted to hurry up and come home and fix everything.
Yeah.
So I was looking back for, give me control again.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know? And so maybe there's something to do with control, I think, gives me power. And to be honest with you, I've spent the last 12 years wrestling with that.
Yeah.
Because if it's not drugs and alcohol, I try to find other things to give me a sense of control again
Right.
of my life.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to let go and just ride the wave. I remember in that treatment asking the counselor all this big theological question. He's like, I don't know about all that, you know. Sometimes you just got to ride the wave, baby.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, that was like almost 12 years ago, you know, and that's still like my theme song, Ride the Freaking Wave.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for me to just ride the wave.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So this step is not like, for me, this is a continual step.
Yes.
I have to surrender some of this, and it's by surrendering we win. It's in the admission of my powerlessness is how I get power. It's a really weird thing.
Yeah.
How that works. I don't know why it's that way or how it even works that way. But it's like I gained so much from just letting go.
You ever read Breathing Underwater by Richard Rohr?
Oh, yeah.
So, and he talks about that. It's like he starts it off like, I don't know why it's designed like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why God does it like this. But there's a part in the Bible that says, my power is made perfect in weakness.
Yeah.
It's like, and that seems to be our experience. And he's like, I don't know why it's like that. You know, it seemed to be much easier if we just had the power. You know, like,
Right.
why do we have to go through all this to do that? But no, it's funny that some of the most spiritual stuff that you hear and the best solutions that you hear is the most simple stuff that there is. You know, I had a friend early on in recovery. He's got like 20 years now, and he always breaks it down so simply. It's like you are in this life, and you're in the current. You know, whether you want to be or not, and you're in the current,
Yeah.
and you have two choices: you can swim with it or swim against it.
Uh-huh.
And it always simplified it for me because I always find myself
I'm always holding on to a
swimming
limb,
against it.
trying not to go down the freaking
or
ravine.
that too, right?
Yeah.
When if you just go with it,
Getting tossed around the rocks,
Yeah.
like holding on for dear life.
because you can't stop the current, you can't control it.
Yeah, I
You
feel like
can't
the
control
wise
it.
man walks by and sees me and just shakes his head and walks away like it. No one
Yeah.
can. They could say, everyone can go, let go, but I'm not gonna let go until I get
it's hard
tired
to.
of getting beat against the rocks.
Yeah. Well, that was like, the first time God got me sober. I was 26. I was in the hospital, seizures, DTs, the whole thing. And all I could think about being strapped to a hospital bed was, I need to get back home, get back to work. It's like, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's perfectly insane. They're like, actually, Brian, you need to go somewhere, They're like, we got this place, Ridgeview, go there. And I'm like, I just need to go back home, I'm like in a wheelchair, drooling all over myself. I just need
Wow.
to go back to work. And that's,
Still the illusion of power.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. This thing continues in recovery. Like what we're talking about in the steps with alcohol or drugs is very specific to alcohol and drugs. But like, I'll experience this, in recovery. We were talking about it before. It's another experience that I'm having with powerlessness, and it can be with anything.
Yeah.
My job, my relationships, whatever it is. I will subconsciously, not even intentionally, be directing the show, taking my power back,
Yeah.
running everything, and then it's only when I fail and I realize that all my human resources fail, am I finally in the position to say, okay, this is painful, I'm
Yeah.
done, you take it.
Yeah, and I like how you did that with the step and going right to 2, because I do think you're right. I think 1, 2, and 3 go together really. They kind of work simultaneously.
Yeah.
So step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And we were talking earlier about what books we like to in there. So there's a 12 and 12,
Yeah.
which goes on this whole rant about higher power and the chicken and the egg and this
Right.
whole philosophical thing. And you said something which is none of that mattered. What mattered was you needed it. Whatever it is doesn't matter.
Yep.
All I know is right now I'm in a closet with drunk, can't pull the trigger, and whatever it is, it needs to be here now because I have no other option.
Yeah. And if it's not there, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's step 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, like when you break it down, came to believe that there's a power greater than us that can restore us to sanity. You know, so I first experienced that I'm insane. Like
Yeah.
that's the prerequisite, right? That first step, I'm insane. So now, second step, you know, for me was, like I said, it happens.
You ever go from
simultaneously
sane to insane like between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m.?
all the time?
Yeah.
Right when I wake up, like when I first like wake up, I feel like I'm sane, and then immediately brain gets going, and then I'm just insane.
How long you got? You get 15 minutes or how long
No,
you get?
God, 15 seconds
Yeah.
if I'm lucky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, like when it's with alcohol and drugs, I think for me, it's that second step was, the book says, do you believe or are you willing to believe? And that, I think, is like for a lot of addicts and alcoholics that come in, don't want to talk about the God stuff, right? So like recovery doesn't even ask me to believe. I don't need to believe in God. Am I willing to believe?
Yeah.
Am I just willing to believe that something else can restore my sanity? Now, when it's talking about like when I'm having that first step experience with alcohol and drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
My second step was I was willing to believe it because I saw it. I knew it worked for other people. So I started having that like, well, if it's going to, work for them, so there's got to be something to this deal. Maybe
Yeah.
I need to get a sponsor and start working the steps,
Mm-hmm.
Now, like when I get further into recovery and I start experiencing my powerlessness in different ways and that my life is unmanageable in much different ways, because we didn't even talk about the second half of step 1.
Of the unmanageability.
It's came to believe that there is a power greater than me.
That is my alarm when I wake up in the morning.
So you just freaked out. Yeah, you
Yeah.
just had a moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chad's, I'm like, am I even here?
Yeah.
Am I even here? Am I in bed right now dreaming this? And Chad's phone ring is that sound.
Oh God, I hate that for Chad.
I told him I'm going to have to change my my alarm at the house to something else because
It
every
can't do
time he
that.
gets a phone call, I can't tell if I'm in
You
an
need to
acid
wait.
trip or if I'm here on the planet. So
I had that experience of like, okay, I come to believe that the higher power can restore me to sanity because I've seen it happen in other people. But if I experience my powerlessness in recovery with romantic relationships or with, like my work, my occupation, what I'm doing, or if it's just like anxiety or depression or self-pity or pick a defect, right? I start experiencing my powerlessness with that. The second step brings a completely different experience for me. Like in recovery, is I can have that first step, but I have a little bit more difficulty with the second step because that requires the real, like a different level of faith and trust in higher power. It's like, do you trust that there is a power greater than you that can restore your sanity with relationships, job, money, cookies, right? Whatever it is. And that's been a different experience for me, is really coming to believe that, because if I'm still struggling with something, that means that deep down, I'm not trusting that there's a higher power, something that can restore my sanity in this area.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And that's like, I've been having to really ask myself that question a lot here recently. And the things that we were talking about, I've been going through, recently, is like, it's come to my attention that, dang, as much as I can tell you, man, I've got this great relationship with God. I mean, we're tight, and I trust God and I believe in God and all that. But like, my actions are much different than what my words are.
Yeah.
My internal condition is a lot different. My internal condition suggests I'm not trusting God at all.
yeah,
I'm not trusting that God can restore my sanity.
yeah.
And so
Right.
now I'm just like developing that next level of faith, and like, I hope you can, and that's more of that second step experience.
Yeah. And sometimes someone's having a problem with 2, we go back to 1, right?
Yeah.
Like remembering, we have to remember. Ideally, we can do that in remembering, but some of us have to actually go live that experience again and bang our head against the wall. And I
Yeah.
think like for those ancillary things, like not being drugs and alcohol, but people, places, things, ideas that I can't control. I end up I end up wrestling with it enough to where I get sick and tired of wrestling with it. I end up going back to one where I go, oh, I'm powerless over this. That's right.
Yep.
And then having that community of those people, I had a sponsor who would always say, did you pray for the willingness? Because I call him and he's
Right.
like, well, did you pray? Oh, I pray. What, like it's not listening. I don't hear nothing. It's just bullshit. Well, did you pray for the willingness? And I was like, damn, it was always just stopped me in my tracks. Like I always forget that if I'm not willing, then can I pray for that willingness and ask for that willingness?
Yeah.
And I would say my experience of the step has totally changed, maybe deepened, and because, I don't really get a say in how I'm restored to sanity if I'm really letting go. And if God's like put out a survey, like a survey monkey on me, and was like, hey, how would you rate your service? I would be like, yeah, no, not very efficient, Like you took a long time with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But the benefit of it is that when it does sink and it gets into your bones, it's that thing
Yeah.
and that's the stuff that doesn't leave. That's the foundation in which I can begin to build a new life, and time takes time.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately 1, 2, and let's get right to 3.
Yep. Let's do it.
Because making a decision to now turn our will and our life, our thoughts and our actions over to the care of this power as we understood it.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing
Yeah.
for all you thumpers out there. So yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Yes.
Bada bing, bada boom.
That's it.
Let's
right?
get to we're
Yeah,
moving
no,
on.
it's to
Yeah,
4, right? So we don't even
Yes.
need. Yeah.
but it's not rocket surgery. It's just simple. It's not rocket surgery. We got to admit we're powerless. We got to believe that something's going to help us,
Right.
and now we got to surrender to that thing.
Right. But here's the thing, man, so we talked about that second half of step 1. We didn't really cover that our lives had become unmanageable. So we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And when we think about, like, what does that really mean? My life has become unmanageable. Well, what is my life?
Mm-hmm.
We often think of that as, like, the external stuff, okay? Like, couldn't hold down a job, bank account's constantly negative, relationships fail, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also my life is unmanageable. My thoughts are unmanageable. My feelings, my emotions are unmanageable. I'm constantly afraid. I'm riddled with fear, things like that. And so when we make our third step decision, so again, alcohol and drugs, 1, 2, 3 happen simultaneously. 2 happens in recovery a little bit slower. But then I've always said, if I ever really have an issue, and you touched on it before, if I ever have an issue with 2 or 3, my issue is actually with 1. If I've really experienced powerlessness, the rest of it kind of comes easily. But making that decision to me is like, I make a decision, which means it's backed by action, right? It isn't like okay. No, it's like I'm making this decision, and I think it's like a Tony Robbins thing. If you want to take the island, burn the boats. Like I can't have a fallback. And that's where, for me, like my true experience with 1, specifically as it relates to alcohol and drugs, was it failed. I failed. Everything was a failure. I was a complete failure at living, complete failure at dying. There was nothing left but for me to do this. And so I make that decision. I'm like, I'm going to go this way, and I'm just going to stay going. You talked about it before we got on here, that commitment, right?
Yeah.
I've made this decision. I'm turning my life, my will, whatever it is, over to the care of this higher power, and I'm going this way, and that's it. And there's a lot in that. Because it isn't as simple as just like hitting my knees and saying a prayer. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, it's action, and that's the big difference between belief and faith. And I think we Americans certainly conflate those two things together. And you can believe, but faith is actually taking the action. I can believe the couch will hold me up, but I don't know until I sit on the couch, right? I can believe that this higher power will restore me to sanity, and if I surrender my life and my will over to that, and I can do that, but until I actually do that, right? You know, I have a friend who was really struggling with not going back to old ways of making money, which didn't involve drugs and alcohol, but weren't healthy.
Yeah.
Right? And watching them actually live faith and get on the bike and ride to a job interview and go through this whole thing of actually living out faith was such a beautiful thing to witness. I know it was hell for them, but they were living, that was faith. They were like, okay, this is the path. I'm going to try. I'm going to actually see if this does work out.
Yeah.
And it has.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful to see because that's really hard, you know, and doing this, like running a ministry, you know, it's like, you know, I don't know how it's going to work out, dude, you know, and it's damn near irresponsible, you know,
Yeah.
but it seems to work out.
Yeah.
But it's not until I take that action,
Right.
take that step forward. I think that's the key piece to it. And then when you're talking about being in a community, you look over and you see, oh, you did that too? Yeah, I was worried about all those things. You know, now look at me. I got a van down by the river, you know, like life's great. So I love that it's us making the decision, and how's the word? It says to turn our will and our lives, our thoughts and our actions, over to the care of God as we understood it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's like I don't remember where I was gonna go with that, but it's making that decision to turn it over. Like I always thought it was to God at first. Like I thought I had done that, but really what I did was I turned it over to the care of the 12-step fellowship. You know, like the meetings, the steps, and all that. You know, and until it could develop into a relationship with a higher power, and then it became turning that over to it, and that's still, you know, a work in progress.
That's true, right? Because step 2 doesn't say God.
Right.
Step 3 says God.
Right. We're the higher power, or, you know, whatever anybody wants to say. But
Yeah.
one of my favorite talks always was this guy said, well, how do you really do that? And I even asked that question big, like, what does that mean? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And he said,
Cool, but how?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And he said, I think the way that you actually do step 3 is to do the rest of the steps, you know? Yeah. To write my inventory, to make those amends. If I've
Beautiful.
actually made that decision, then I'm going to go make that amend. And that made it
Perfect.
make sense to me a lot better.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is. I've heard that before too. What a great segue.
There you go.
Have you done this before?
A couple times.
Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Yeah, no, that's cool. I'm all right with that.
Right.
What's your experience with step 4? How fun was that?
First time I ever did it, first page I wrote down, it broke me.
Did you have a grid and a worksheet, or was it just like...
First time I ever did it, it was very willy-nilly. It was just starting to write some stuff down. Write down, I forget even how my first sponsor did it. I don't even remember what I was writing down. I was writing down, like I started it all backwards from like what the big book would teach. And I was writing down a lot of conduct, you know. And then I was writing some resentments. And there were some things that like I had some resentment that I had buried, you know, that when I started becoming awake to these things and writing them down on paper, it was hard, man. It was breaking me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first one I ever did it was like that, you know. It was facing that. It was like that surface level, just digging out that top level, just that first layer of the onion. You know, when I finally, God brought me back in, and I made that decision because it says, you know, next we launch out on this course of action, and really step 3 begins this whole process of 3 through 7, right? So I say that prayer. It leads me into, you know, take away my difficulties. That my difficulties are what I
There's
write
no
in my
amen,
inventory.
right? Until
Correct.
Yeah.
There's no amen at the end of step 3 because it's the beginning of this process that we kill it with the amen in step 7.
Yeah.
So my first one was
You think they did that on purpose?
Yeah.
You think so?
Absolutely.
You think they brought it and then they were like, hey, let's go back and take out that amen because this is really the...
Maybe they just didn't put it in to begin with.
Yeah.
But either way, intentional or not,
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
So, okay, so let's just, I just want to reiterate this. So what you're saying is the step 3 prayer starts, but doesn't really end until you get to step 7.
It launches a process, essentially, is what the
3, 4,
third
5,
step
6,
prayer
7.
is. Yeah, because ultimately in the third step, what I'm deciding to do is to stop being the director of the show. I'm going to stop telling Christian to do what he needs to do, what my parents should do, my girlfriend, my friends, my boss, my whatever, right? Like, I'm not going to direct the show anymore. I'm going to play the role that I'm assigned. That's essentially the decision that we're making.
Yeah, and then in 4, it's we never knew how to be a worker among workers, friend among friends.
Right.
Right. So now
Which hurts when you figure that out.
Dude, I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I would say, for me, the experience with 4 was the big rocks I held on to.
Yeah.
All the sex stuff, I didn't tell nobody. I was like, no, I'm keeping all that.
Right.
And it wasn't until years later that I finally revealed it. And that was, I do not recommend that. Like, you do that, Searching and Fearless. It's the best that you can do at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I'm being honest, that was the best I could do at
Yep.
that time.
Yes, 100% right.
I was too scared and didn't have enough faith in this higher power or in people
Yeah.
or in myself or in anything that I could give up. I could give up what I could give up at that time. And I also did it pretty quickly. The way I did it was in this group, and they give you the workbook, and next Tuesday, they give it to you workbook on Tuesday night, and then next Tuesday, we're going through that. So I had a week to come back. And I'm glad that that's what I had,
Yeah.
because I would have bled it out as long as possible.
Right.
So I came back with what I could, and I think I ideally, whenever I'm going with somebody, and through this process, I would ask them to say, let's get the big rocks first. Like you stole a piece of gum,
In 7th grade.
you're mad at the government. Okay.
Right.
Like, let's get to the big stuff first.
Yeah.
What's the thing you don't want to tell me?
Right.
That's the one, because that's the thing that will be the most freeing, And I remember going through so much about and handing things over in prayer, where it was what was such a boulder on my shoulder. I thought I told you.
There you go.
Was actually this tiny rock when I handed it to God, and the visualization of that handing it over.
Yeah.
Because I had to do that as I wrote it, because I was freaking out. Right. But it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
But I like what you're talking about. Like, I always impress upon people that you can only do what you're capable of in that moment. I couldn't write down everything on my first 4-step, and my first 4-step was very thorough, but it wasn't anywhere close to what was really deep down in there. It was what I could do at the time, and I think that's right, because I think, like, especially, and it depends case by case, person by person, but like a lot of people have gone through a lot of stuff. And if you start, you want to open all of that up all at one time, I don't think we could handle that, and like my experience was, like I said, the first one that I did was it was surface level. It got that first layer of the onion kind of out of the way. It scooped that up a little bit. But there was something, I was 9 months sober before I had some childhood stuff pop up into my consciousness. And I think that was designed by God that way. I don't think I could have handled that, when I wrote my first 4-step. But the experience of that, like you said, this is the step that like everybody gets freaked out by. You mean I got to start writing a moral inventory? It's like, what does that actually mean? If you really break it down, we start with our resentments, right? And so we write down like the people that we're holding this negative energy towards, is the way I look at it. And we start writing it down, and it teaches us how to write basically like 4 columns of it. We write the person, place, thing, institution, whatever it is. We write why we're resentful. And then we write all these areas of self
That it affects.
And like my sponsor always says, you should have fun with the first 3 columns.
Yeah.
Because it's all about other people and why they're
Yeah.
pissing you off, right?
Yeah.
But then you get into the 4th one.
Yeah.
Because we determine that, resentment is a thing that's going to take me out more than anything else.
Yeah.
In fact, it kills more of us than anything else.
Yeah.
And so we get in the 4th column, we start looking at, well, where in this situation am I being selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened?
Yeah.
And then I start taking my fears from that 4th column, and then I start writing a fear inventory. And I can
Yeah.
see how I'm being riddled with fear in everything that I do, and how all my resentment comes from fear anyway.
Yeah.
And so actually it's really all about fear.
Yeah.
It's all about fear.
And resentment, the word resent, the etymology of the word is to refeel.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're resenting something, we're taking something in the past and whatever that situation was and how it made us feel, and then we bring it into the future.
Yes.
And we refeel it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're all mad, and that shit's doesn't even exist anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we're so connected to it, and that's
Yeah.
why it's important to write the resentments down. And I love when I'm not really mad at anybody, Okay. So that's why you start with the resentments,
Yeah.
ideally.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, because again, you start
Leads you to your
learning
fears.
that it's all about fear. And then you get into your conduct, right? And
Yeah.
sex conduct, but it's all kinds of conduct.
Yeah.
Anybody that I harmed in any kind of a way. And that's the part that you write down and you start looking at how I was showing up in the world. And so, when I'm writing my 4-step, no, I'm not going to feel the best, right? I'm going to be kind of disturbed by this, and that's okay, because eventually the book calls it a house cleaning, right? And that's what we're doing. We do this, and it gives the analogy of like a business taking inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a business is going to take some inventory, and they're going to look at the parts of their business that's not really helping the business out, and they're going to get rid of these things without remorse or regret. And so it encourages us to do the same thing with our inventory.
Yeah.
We're becoming aware of things, okay?
Yeah.
We're just people, right?
Yeah.
We're not any better or worse than anybody else. Everybody's got this. And you know what? Good for you for having the courage to actually face yourself and look
Yeah.
at this stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're showing how you're looking at how you're showing up in the world,
Yeah.
because you want to show up differently.
So you write all these things out. That's 4. 5, you now take these things and go over them with somebody.
Yeah.
If there's some really heavy stuff, you can go to a minister who's bound by a covenant of, silence. But the point is to tell it to another human. I think in the telling to another human is the telling to God. I think this happens at the same time. But the result of these 2, 4, and 5 is we get this list, which
Yeah.
leads us to 6.
Right.
Right? So out of 4 and 5, we find this list of reoccurring themes, reoccurring thought patterns, reoccurring behaviors, and that gives us this step 6, which is entirely ready to have God remove all these defects characters. So what are these defects? These are the things that we get from 4 and 5.
From writing that inventory.
From writing
right?
that inventory.
So, 5 admitted to God to
This is
ourselves.
why you
and to
have
another
to
human
have
being.
5 in there, right? Because you need someone else to kind of go, okay, as someone is sharing, as you share your inventory with someone, then they're picking out. They're going, here's selfish, self-seeking, control, whatever.
Yeah.
Listen, here's all these patterns. Those are that's the defects of character.
What we would call that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what, because, a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. If I were just to take my own inventory and look at it, I can't see what I can't see. We're kings that slipping into delusion, so I need somebody to help me to see these things for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Point these things out. But I also want to talk about, as we're talking about this, like the benefits of doing this, right? So we talked about the house cleaning analogy. Step 4 is if I'm cleaning out my house, I'm writing my inventory, I'm going around my house, my apartment, wherever I live, and I'm taking out all the trash. And I'm gathering it up and I'm putting it in wherever I'm putting it, right? Now, if I just did step 4 and I've just got an apartment full of trash, right? But step 5 takes all that trash and throws it away. And now
Get
I've
it
got
out
a
the
clean
house.
apartment.
Yeah.
You know, and now 5th step promises start happening. I can look the world in the eye. Before I ever did this promise, I looked at the ground. That's all I could ever do. I couldn't look you in the eye.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at myself in the eye. I had all this repressed stuff.
Yeah.
And what do we do with repressed emotions and feelings and traumas and things like that? We mask them, we shove them down, we drink, and we get high.
Yeah.
Right? So this is why, like, this was so important. The reason why first time I didn't stay sober, I didn't do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, second time, okay, now we've dug in, we've scooped some of this stuff, we're doing the house cleaning. We tell somebody, right? We share this with them. First time I ever did this, man, I thought legitimately, because I had no idea what this experience was all about, I thought my first sponsor was going to call the cops on me. Genuinely thought that.
Yeah.
You know, that did not happen. He got up from the couch. He said, it was an honor to hear this. Thank you so much, and I love you. And he gave me a big hug. And you know, it's stuff like that, like, we've often talked about, you and I, like the first time I ever, well, I don't want to say that, but like became really aware of and really experienced this like true unconditional love was from other alcoholics and drug addicts in recovery. Like hearing the worst of the worst and saying, I love you. And that's so powerful, man. Because now we get to be seen, we get to be heard for everything that we are, and we still got somebody there walking shoulder to shoulder with us. It's super powerful.
Yeah. Again, counterintuitive.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you all the worst parts about me. I'm going to expose these things about me, and I'm going to end up getting love.
Yeah.
In return.
Yeah.
Not an intuitive process.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get this list, and I think, like, I'm trying to move us forward here, but I like how we become entirely ready, that it breaks this up. Because it really could have just been, 6 and 7 could have been worded as one. There's a reason why it's broken into 2.
Right.
So in your experience, you get this list back. Did you get it back that same time you sat with them, or was the next week you met with them, he gave you the list?
Yeah, and it's different with different people do it differently, and I've gone through it with 3 different sponsors, and it's been a different experience every time. I mean, the first time, yeah, you just get it back, you sit with God for an hour, you know, kind of meditate on this stuff, you ask God if you're not willing to give it over. My most recent sponsor took the list, gave me the list, and said 2 things are going to happen. 1, you're either going to have this like super emotional and weepy experience where you're just like, man, I don't want to show up like this anymore. Or 2, give it a week and see what happens. And basically being like, you've got this whole list, you've become aware of all these things, and now you go out into the world and you start to experience your defects. Like God shows you your defects, and then through the experience of them, do you go, okay, yeah, okay, I'm ready now.
Yeah.
You know, I'm ready. And so step 6 is like becoming ready. It's you know, how do we become ready? Now, because I've always said like 6 and really 6 and 7 can be done through the amends experience. Really, like when you sit across from somebody and you start owning your defects, you own your behaviors and the way that you've shown up, and they provide you with feedback of how you showed up. It's like if somebody sits there and is like, dude, you're a huge freaking jerk for a long time, you know, or like some feedback that I got, like, hey, you know, maybe I wasn't a great friend right here, you know, or a great roommate, or I didn't show up as a boyfriend the way that I wanted to, or whatever it is. Like when I hear these things, then I have that 6-step experience of like, okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
Now I'm ready.
I like how you've done that. So you've done that with 3. Working 3 means going through 4 and 5. Working 6 means living and going through the amends process, 8 and 9. Yeah. Yeah.
Or like right after.
We keep moving forward. We keep moving.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Or like for me, it was, you know, once we got done with that 5th step and my sponsor said, you know, if you really are ready, you could say your 7-step prayer. Otherwise, sit on it for a week and see what God does. Next morning, I show up to work. And I was working at a treatment center at the time, and one of the clients comes up to me. And he's got this situation over at the sober living. And, you know, it's I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't a good situation. And instead of helping him to get out of his resentment and to help him to see his 4th column and to try to help him get through his feeling, I just like threw kerosene on the fire, you know, and I was like, oh yeah, that's BS and they shouldn't be doing that and this, that, and the other. And I remember I walked out, I prayed, I got that awareness, and I walked outside and I prayed and I called my sponsor. I was like, all right, I'm ready. And I told him what happened, and it was like, okay,
Yeah.
I see it now. So then, I experienced it, and now I'm ready to finally say, okay, God, like, please do something else with this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like going, oh, I'm the asshole.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been pointing my finger at everybody. I'm the one. Yeah.
And the neat thing about this process is, like I said, the first time I went through this, a very first layer of the onion. The second time was a much deeper dive into it. And then the next time after that was really like seeing how I show up in all of my relationships at work and with friends, as a sponsor, as a sponsee, like in every relationship, how am I showing up? And I learned so much more about myself as I go through this process, another layer of the onion.
So, out of this 4 and 5, there's going to be some people on there.
Yeah.
Right? And we're ideally going to end up for 8 making a list of all the people we've harmed.
Yeah.
We're going to be pulling that from 4.
Yep.
Ideally.
Yeah.
Maybe we add some because we've lived a little bit. Not too long, hopefully. I'm a fan of like doing these. Like let's not, especially if you're first time, the very first time, let's move through these quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this list of all the people we've harmed, and we became willing to make an amends to them all.
Yeah.
And this list of people comes from 4.
Yes.
It might be people we've hurt, people we have resentments towards.
Yeah.
When we've gotten enough humility to realize our part in that situation. Some things we had no part in, right? Things that happened to us in our childhood, right? Some abuses, right? Things like that. We didn't have a part in that.
Right.
Right? So it's important that we're, ideally, the person you sat with on 5 is helping you with 8, right?
Yeah.
Because they know. They have
been there.
familiarity.
Yeah.
They've been there themselves, but they know what you shared and the details of all that.
Yeah.
And so you're making this list and you're becoming ready.
Yeah, becoming willing.
So just to kind of move us forward, the I love this approach. The one column is right now. I can do that right now, right?
Yeah.
It might be mom. Man, mom's always gonna love me.
Best friend. Yeah.
Yeah, best friend, old drinking buddy who's sober now. Yeah, I can do that now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one, maybe later. And then there's one that says, no, not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that approach
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you the freedom to go, I'm not doing those. But let's write them down anyway. The ones you're not going to do, let's write those down.
Yeah.
And give you the freedom to not do it. And when you get through that, you go through that first column of all the ones that you're like, I'll do those. Ideally, the experience becomes, it wasn't so bad. I can do the maybe laters. And then when you get through the maybe laters, you have a little more experience, a little more life. You're living a little bit.
Yeah.
Also, this might be confusing, but, we get that list, and then we go to 9. But I think most people will continue on to 10, right? Like, so 9 might take a while to make all these amends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not going to call out of the blue and go, hey, Johnny, sorry I stole your bike, because we don't got Johnny's number, we don't know how to address that or whatever.
Yeah.
So it might take some time. So
it will.
We keep moving forward.
Yeah. You don't need to make all your amends before you go to 10. Right. Otherwise, hell, I still wouldn't be on 10.
Yeah.
Because there's just there's 1 or 2 in Indiana, and I don't know how to, you know what I mean? So, yeah. So, all right. So we said the 7-step prayer. We gave all this, we really gave this to God, good and bad. You got all of me, right?
Yeah.
And that's the humility piece of that, is I'm not demanding God take away my defects, because I don't know if some of them are useful or not. And then we've got that list, like you said, Nate, of people that we've harmed, that we discovered in step 4, that we are willing to make amends to.
Mm-hmm.
So we get that list, and a good tool for me was a note card routine. On the front, you put the person's name, and then you've got a plus minus system. The first column is a plus or minus, are you willing? Because we want to be honest with this whole process. If there's somebody I'm not willing to make amends to, okay, minus, right? And then the second one is, do I know where they are? Can I get in touch with them? So it was easy to start with the plus. I know where they are, and I'm willing, and then I go to I'm willing, but I don't know where they are. And then finally you get the minus where it's like, yeah, I don't think I'm willing and I don't know where they are. You know, to your point, you go through them and eventually it's like, ideally, once you've made enough, you get to the ones that you weren't willing, and now you're willing because you've seen what the experience is like, and making the direct amend, step 9, right? Make a direct amend to those we harmed as long as it doesn't injure those or others, right? And it's not an apology tour like it was taught to me. We're not going around like, I'm so sorry, all this stuff. It's not that.
Yeah.
I caused you this harm, you know? I want to know how it made you feel, and I want to know what I can do to make it right. Yeah. I'm making an amends. I'm fixing the situation, or at least like however you tell me to fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
I did an amends once, and they were like, and you did this. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, how can I make it better?
Yeah.
Thanks. I didn't think about that.
But this is another one that terrifies people, right? Like, oh my God, I really got to go and sit down and like do this. But the experience of it, like what happens is like all the promises that people always talk about, the AA promises or the 9th step promises that you hear so much in the meetings about like what happens once we actually do this. We clean out that negative energy. But it was also, my experience, like we become willing as we go through 4 through 8. Once I'm willing to make that amendment, like I've seen my role, I've seen my faults, I've discussed it with God and somebody else, I'm willing to make amends to you. Now I'm free. But the actual amend, if I've caused you harm, sets you free. And so some people, maybe they don't want to be free and they don't want to hear your amend.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I can only do what I can do. I can only control what I can control, which is to be willing to do this and to make the approach to you if I've harmed you. Hey, I screwed up.
Yeah.
I'd love to make things right with you if you're willing and able.
Yeah.
And then if they are, they sit down, they tell you how to make it right.
Yeah.
And
if not, you move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing on time. All right, we're getting there. So then we go to 10.
Yep.
So there might be some people on that list still.
Right.
But we're going to keep moving forward in the step process.
Yeah.
Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Yeah. Not if. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
Yeah.
I had a buddy that helped me with this step, and he said, you don't have to necessarily admit it to who you were wrong to. You just got to admit it. And that was really powerful to me because sometimes when I would admit it, just like in my close relationship, like with my wife.
Yeah.
Oh man, I yelled and I shouldn't have yelled. Sorry, or Well, that's cool and all, but I'm gonna yell again, right? So when I started to promptly admit it to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and I got that honest feedback.
Yeah.
Why do you think you did that? Whoa. Because, the dishes weren't done, or I don't know what
Right.
some bullshit
Yeah.
would set me off early for sure. That admission and then being seen by somebody who I've given permission to give me unfiltered feedback, I was growing from the pain. It wasn't just purposeless hoopla. It was like there was meaning behind it because now I'm learning, and I'm learning how I can do something different about it.
Yeah.
What about for you, step 10?
Yeah. So, to your point, it says we continue this way of life as we clean up the past. So basically it's like, as soon as I make my first approach or my first amend, I get on step 10, which is that it's 4 through 9. I mean, that's what it is. The whole process that we do in steps 4 through 9 is really just to get us to learn how to live this way. So step 10 and then 11 and 12 is like literally living this way of life. We have a new way of life. It's not so much about checking off a step, right? Mm-hmm. So now it's like whenever I'm resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid, like you said, when, not if, because I'm always going to be a human being. When that happens, I ask God, I talk to God. I talk to either my sponsor or somebody in my network about it. We get that perception shift. That's for me what it is. Having somebody hear me out, having somebody shift my perspective. I make amends if I need to, and then I turn my thoughts to somebody I can help. That's what step 10 is. So we call it the walking around step. This is what I do every day.
Yeah.
It just becomes, like as we were talking about before, like these steps at first become super robotic. Like I'm very robotic about it. But now it's literally just incorporated into my consciousness. Like I just walk around. Like if I start getting frustrated with something, God, please remove this frustration. Call Christian. I'm frustrated at this. You talk to me about it. Do I owe an amend? No. Okay. Now I go turn my thoughts to somebody, like, because I'm trying to get out of me.
Yeah.
Is ultimately the point.
Right.
Right. So selfish and self-centeredness
Me,
is the
me,
root
me,
of my
me,
problems.
me.
Yes, me. It's all about me.
Yeah.
Everything's about me, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing is designed to get me out of me.
Yeah.
And that's what gives me the freedom.
Because that's the root of our problem.
Yeah.
Selfishness and self-centeredness.
Yeah. Well, and like, look, if you think about it like this, we drank and we got high for ease and comfort. And we drank and got high because we were uncomfortable. We were resentful. We were restless. We were irritable. We were discontented. We were afraid, right? And so we drank and got high because of these things. Well, now instead of that, I pray and talk to other people, you know, and I turn my thoughts. Like that gives me the ease and comfort in a much different way, obviously.
And talk to other people. Like, you know, it was years into the process for me that I started opening up more to other men in my circle. You know, and I've shared it before. Like, I've always thought that if it wasn't directly related to an obsession to use or drink, it didn't relate, right?
Right.
So I somehow justified it that I need to deal with this.
Yeah.
This is my problem.
Yeah.
And I was cutting myself short because when I began to reflect these things to other men, it was like I realized that they had the same mental obsessions,
right,
and anger outbursts,
right,
and discontentment about areas of their life.
Yeah.
And immediately I felt not alone, which was so powerful because I didn't feel as crazy.
Exactly.
You know, when you feel crazy, there's nowhere to go.
Right.
It's horrible. Like you feel like there's no. But when somebody says, "Oh, I just did that Tuesday for last,"
yeah,
you go, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. This is like what it's like to be us now," and it's real powerful.
Yeah.
And that gave me permission to be myself, to begin to be authentic to somebody else, to talk about the stuff that was going on in my head, which I thought was unrelated,
right,
which is all related, you know. I think that was really step 10 coming to life for me, and I didn't know I was working 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and this is where, you know, no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we can see how our experience can benefit others, right? Which is a 9th-step promise, but really holds true in the 10th step. Like if I'm calling somebody with a 10th step or somebody's calling me, now I get to draw on my experience. And that is the most magical experience in recovery. Because when I get somebody who calls and they're just wrestling with something, man, and I just kind of sitting on the other end of the line just with a smile on my face because I just went through it 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, right? And now I get to draw on my experience. Yeah. Or I get to get them in touch with somebody who's had the experience because maybe I haven't. Yeah. You know, but that is, to me, this is where recovery happens. And this is where my spiritual growth happens, is the willingness to be open and honest with another human being. Like we were talking about before we kicked off the show, man, it's like I couldn't before get honest with you or anybody about what was going on in between my ears. I just couldn't do it. But now I have to. And now I'm glad that I do, because this is how I get to have the freedom from everything. And this is how I get to grow and see things. And like you said, sometimes when somebody else has that experience, like for me, it just gives my experience permission. You know what I mean? Like, okay, all right, I don't feel so insane anymore that I'm going through this. And it gives me hope because, hey, you've gone through this. You're okay. So maybe I'm okay too.
Yeah. So then we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood it, praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the power to carry it out. So this is a great pontificating step.
Yep.
Boy, we could preach this step all day long. There's so many good shares on this step, you know. And I think I heard this from a Joe and Charlie tape, which is, I sit there in silence, and then I get up and I get going because I'm an alcoholic and I got shit to do. And I was like, yes.
Yep.
We're in a meeting, filming Raleigh World, in a meeting in Pigeon Forge, and it was a bunch of old-timers. They were old, and they were old-timers. And everybody, it was this step was the topic, and everybody talked about how badly they do it.
Right.
And I was like, I cried
Yeah.
in the meeting because it was such a breath of fresh air
Mm-hmm.
to be like, I do it terribly too.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm trained in this shit too.
Yeah, I was
You know what I
gonna
mean?
say,
And I'm horrible.
Right.
Sometimes if I get a second or 17
Yeah.
seconds, dude,
Yeah.
that's all I can get.
Yeah.
But that was such a beautiful experience to hear everybody else go, yeah, not so great at that.
Right.
And we have to find what works. Meditation. My first time trying to meditate, I had a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think that's what meditation's supposed to do, right? So somebody said, oh, you don't have to just sit there. You can do a walking meditation. Oh, well, you do a walking meditation? Yeah, you just walk and quiet your mind and pay attention to where your body is and be mindful. And that was my pathway into meditation.
Yeah.
Walking meditation. That gave me, I got freedom to exist and become my own expression of this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This step is infinite and it's never ending. And I like the reason why I love this way of life is because some people will say, well, it's just like the 12 steps and it's very like dogmatic or and I'm like, really, this way of life is a foundation and everything can come from it. Because I think, because I go to therapy too, and I think therapy is 11 step. I think it's 11 step work. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can look at that because meditation, you're right. When I first tried it, 5 seconds. I can't because I'm just, forget that, man. I'm 3 months sober. I can't meditate. You know what I mean? I get a little bit further on. I go through the steps, having a different experience. I think the most I've ever sat and meditated, 17 minutes. But that even that ebbs and flows, just depending on where I'm at. But the best kind of meditation I do is when I'm going for a drive. I just, for whatever reason, like that's my space. Yeah. That's my space for me where things process. I get inspiration.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Windshield therapy is what I call it.
Yeah, windshield therapy. I like that.
Yeah, we went to Montana, and we drove from Colorado up into Montana.
Mm-hmm.
It was an 8-hour drive.
Yeah.
And there were periods of it where we're in silence.
Yeah.
And you're just driving, and you can see, and the thought, and it's a meditation. The reason why I know I'm meditating because the thought comes, and then it goes. And then the next one comes. Don't worry, I got a bunch of them. They're all coming.
Yeah.
And so then the next one comes, and then it goes. It goes is when I know, I'm meditating right now.
Like a cloud, right? You just watch the clouds go by. I'm not attached to the thought. I'm not doing anything with the thought. I'm just letting them happen.
But something about being moving helps for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we can look at it and be super robotic about it, or we can just accept that this really is a step that, it is infinite, and we can do it in many different ways. So, we have the nightly review, right, as part of my 11th step, and then the on awakening process where I sit, I ask these questions, I consider my plans for the day, I bring God into it, like people say, I bring God into it.
Let's hit that nightly review real quick, because I think that's really important. So, do you have a worksheet that you use for the nightly review?
Go out of the book.
Okay.
It's basically
Where
the
was
10th step,
I?
but we're just trying to catch anything was I resentful, selfish, dishonest, afraid, and then it just asks questions like,
and it says we are careful not to drift off into morbidity.
which
because
wander
whoever
into
wrote
morbid
that
reflection
knows
did that, yes. And I was always the king of that. So I get all my sponsees are all overthinkers, and they all people who wander into morbid reflection.
It's so
that's what I
fun to
always
just
did.
hate myself all night.
Yeah, right.
Go to bed that way.
And that's what it's so important. That's my last sponsor would always say, take your inventory, don't let your inventory take you. Right? It's because I would do that. I'd take my inventory and I'd just sit there and get miserable about it. It's because the first line in that says we do a constructive review. You see, what I would do is a destructive review, right? I'm destructing myself. Well, no, this is supposed to be constructive, Yeah. And so it's just that final cleaning up throughout the day. But it also asks what did I pack into the stream of life too? So if I was of service and if I was available, or if I did some good things and brought some good things in the world, I want to acknowledge that too. I packed into the stream of life today.
Yeah.
And
sometimes we need help realizing we've done some good things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all of that, right? And then it goes on to talk about, we're be quick to see where religious people are right. So we might be anti-religious, but let's see where they're actually right. Or like for me, what it means is like I get to read all kinds of spiritual stuff, man. Eckhart Tolle, Anthony DeMello, Richard Rohr, Emmett Fox. Like I get to dive into all this stuff and really deepen and broaden my, not just my understanding, but my experience with my higher power, you know, and really help the things go from the head to the heart.
Yeah.
But that's all 11 step stuff too.
Yeah.
I love this. We could talk about that forever.
Yeah. A lot of people share nightly inventories.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, you might have a sponsor or a group of people that might go that are sharing it to help keep each other accountable. But also, I think that's also could be helpful because somebody could say, "Hey, man, there's nothing good on there. You didn't do nothing good today."
Right.
And we need that. We need that reflection.
Yes, we do.
So, having had a spiritual awakening,
and that's a promise,
as a result of these steps,
right?
We tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Yeah, man.
Having had a spiritual awakening, what's the difference between a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience?
To me, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So to me, it's the same thing in terms of like what they're talking about, what we're being promised as the result of working the steps. To me, it's an awareness, and that's all we're going for, right? So like we don't do these inventories and make these amends so that God can remove this defect. It's that we can see ourselves for what we are, become aware of our defects, and then this way, ideally, now that I'm aware of my defect, I'm going to go into the world and cause less harm with it. I'm not going to be a tornado anymore.
Remove from me the defects of character that would stand in the way of my usefulness to you and others.
Right. And some of them, in some cases, are going. So he's not necessarily just going to, oh, you're selfish? Well, I'm just going to remove selfishness.
Yeah.
Or, whatever the case is, right? It's like, now that I'm aware of this, like if lust is a problem, with members of whatever gender that you're attracted to, it's like now instead of saying, maybe in the past we were manipulative or we were dishonest with members of that gender because we wanted something from them, we still probably have those thoughts, like the lust still exists, but what are my actions behind that now? Used to be, well, my actions were driven by that, and so I caused harm. Well, now I have the thought, but my actions are different.
Yeah.
Or if it's like resentment, frustration, anger, whatever, like, this person is this, that, or the other, and you're super mad, and you got that running dialogue, and maybe back in the day...
You're really good at filtering your cuss words. Yeah. I'm fucking horrible
sometimes,
at that.
I know, right? Well, like, so maybe it was back in the day, I just thought you were a raging piece of shit, right? There you go, unfiltered.
Thank you.
And so maybe
Feels
that
so
thought
much
went,
better.
that thought went through my head, and I was just like, God, Christian, just shut up. You're a piece of shit. Whereas now going through this process, now I become aware of this, and that thought might go through my head. God, Christian's a raging piece of shit. But I don't say this out loud. I'm not causing harm with it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's we're becoming aware of these things, and that's what the spiritual awakening to me is.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And it talks about so we do have a shift in perspective.
But we don't just do nothing with that awakening, right?
Right. Right.
Now we're going to carry the message.
Yes.
We're going to try to not just be at a neutral position. We don't get all this so that we can get money and get bitches, right?
Right.
We do all this so that we can actually be helpful to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, if I don't, I won't keep it.
Yeah.
I have to give it away to keep it. It's the whole paradox of the whole thing. So having had a perspective shift, whole attitude and outlook upon life will change, right? Now becoming aware of who I am and ideally being able to accept myself as a holy person, a person who is whole, right?
Yeah.
Not just, I'm just going to be a saint. It's like, no, I'm actually just the way that I am.
Yeah.
All right, and giving that to my higher power, having this experience with all these things, having this spiritual awakening, tried to carry the message. It almost seems to be this what the whole thing is all about. Even in the third step prayer, if you go back to that, it says, take away my difficulties so that victory over them can bear witness to those I would help. It doesn't say take away my difficulties for me because I don't like difficulties.
Yeah. There's prayers associated each step. I think if you're going through the steps, maybe Google what the prayers are because the prayers are very informative, I think.
Yeah.
They let us know what the steps really kind of about.
Right.
Once you carry this message and you sit with someone else and you go through this process and you take someone else through this process, you also get taken through the process.
Yep.
And then, you know, I had a sponsee say, well, I didn't call because, you know, I know you're busy. And I'm like, dude, don't pretend like you know what I need. You don't know what I need.
And that's all. Like that's selfish, right?
Yeah. Call me, because guess what? I got someone I call,
Yeah.
and they got someone they call, and they got someone they call. So none of us are left holding the bag.
Yeah.
It gets spread. We all got shit on our hands at this point, you know?
Yeah.
So it's all spread out. So just make that call.
Yeah.
Because in you making that call, you're helping someone else in their own recovery.
Right. So we determined earlier that selfishness, self-centeredness is my problem, right? My problem is I'm all about me. So when I get somebody and I get a guy that says, well, I know you're busy, so I wasn't going to call. It's like, that's selfish. I need you to call.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to call. My sponsees have saved my life more than anything.
Oh, it's so weird.
Yeah.
You get a call and you're like right in the middle of like teetering on some weird shit.
Yeah, I'm like
and someone
crying,
calls
yeah.
and you're like,
Yeah.
oh damn, I gotta answer
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
And all of a sudden you're snapped back into reality.
I don't even remember what I was upset about before.
Yeah.
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 So please don't tell me that, like,
Please
I don't
call.
want to be a burden. No, like,
Yeah.
If
I
I'm going to
can't
burden
answer,
you if
I
you
won't.
need to call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, man, is that I honestly think I learn more hearing somebody else's inventory than I do sharing my inventory.
Yeah.
Like sitting down with a sponsee and hearing their fifth step, I learn more about myself.
You sit there and then you're like, oh my God, I still do that.
I do that. I was doing that. I didn't even know I was doing that. God dang it, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is like, and it says in the doctor's opinion, this is very important, that Bill did what he did in the hospital, took the steps, and it says he presented his concepts to others as part of his rehabilitation. So we get this misconception that I'm going to work the steps and then I'm going to sponsor. It's like, no, sponsoring and taking somebody through the steps is actually part of my recovery. It's part of my rehabilitation. It's part of the steps.
You ever read the Back to Basics?
No.
Oh, I'm gonna get you that book.
Yeah.
You'll love it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, you're not the first person who told me that. So
Really?
I guess that's a sign I should probably get that.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
kind of just the old method.
Yeah.
What they did in those first
Oh,
few
yeah.
years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the way that they would do 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think in the night.
They would help them write their own, their
Yeah.
inventory. Yeah.
That in the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of it because they needed some people to recover so they could take
Continue
other
to
people
go.
through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 So I think as we're wrapping up, I just want to say that a lot of people come up with a lot of reasons why not to do this steps.
Right.
And it's really simple. It's pretty straightforward. And find someone who will help you through the process. And it doesn't matter where you're at. I've taken where I thought we were going to do with this. I've taken and applied these steps in several areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm having codependent issues, I'm going through steps now in codependency.
Yeah.
With lust issues, sex issues, go through the steps.
Yep.
When I'm having issues with my thinking and my emotions, so I might be not in 12 years haven't done it 12 times, but maybe 9.
Yeah.
Right. Because every time I go through this process, there are new things that get revealed.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that, what I said in the intro, which is the steps is the one framework that will teach you how to be spiritual. So if you want to know how to be spiritual, go through the steps. No matter what your felt need is, I believe that these steps can help you to learn how to live a spiritually principled life.
Yeah. Well, and the best thing is it won't hurt you. If you do it and you're like, screw this, okay, fine. But I
Yeah.
mean, just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last words?
Nah, dude, I could have done an hour on each one of these steps, man. I thoroughly enjoy it. I love this stuff, and I appreciate being on and having the opportunity to do this with you. And yeah, man,
We are not saints. We're just trying to live along spiritual lines.
that's it.
That's it.
We're willing to grow.
Willing.
Yep.
Thank you for listening, and we hope this has been helpful to you. This has been the Most High Show.